In the book of Exodus or Shemot chapter 24, Moshe is with Israel in front of the mountain, Mount Sinai. Mikey calls in verse number 5. He says, he sent young men of the children of Israel, and they offered ascending offerings and slaughterings of peace offerings. Were these just randomly chosen young men, or were these selected young men? But somehow, young men were brought into a leadership role of priesthood. I remember being a young man. I don't know if you do, Mike. That was an awful long time ago for you, but
what did you say, Sonny?
Mike, I want to ask you a question.
Well, wait a minute. Before you do, Barry, I just got to tell you that one of those young leaders, I think, stole Moshe's shirt and passed it down through the centuries, and Barry Phillips is wearing it this week.
Yes, it's a very anointed shirt. I'll let you borrow it sometime.
Okay, go ahead.
Mike, do you remember the length and endurance required of the process to go from being idealistic in ministry to being having realistic idea of ministry? Was that not a forming process?
Yeah, I mean, I just wrote a letter. I just released a commercial here. I just released a message, MP3, CD, whatever, and it's about the experience I just had in this past week regarding revival. We're going to be talking about that a little bit about the youth. It dawned on me how much of what we do is routine. And there, ministry is the same as anything else. As you walk in with idealistic, as you said the word easier than I did, idealistic notions about what it's going to be, the excitement, everything else. And then you find out that there's a lot of routine in the midst of it. And that's the moment in time in which you have to make a decision of what you're going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what you do on a weekly basis, a lot of what I do on a weekly basis is very much routine. I can pretty much tell you how many clicks of a mouse it takes to get my Living Torah program from the excitement and thrill of the recording it to the reality of it being online. It's just, it's okay. I got to do, I click here, I move this, I delete that, I delete this, I do this, click, 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 export, click, click. And, then it goes to a different program, then it goes online, then it goes here, and then the newsletter. I mean, I got it down, Barry. I got it down. But remembering that a lot of the fruit comes from routine is the realization of that going from the idealistic to the actual reality of something happening.
Mike, I remember as a young 20-something preacher, I had some what I thought were pretty hot, intriguing sermons ready to go on the evangelistic trail.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the company of what you might call the old guard pastors who were seasoned veterans in ministry, and they had established themselves as trustworthy men of respect, men of, they were the guys you voted for because they were well known to fill particular boards and so forth. But being in their homes, you kind of realize they're just human beings.
Yeah.
And they have their stuff. But we would sit in the, around the table or in their living rooms after a revival service at night. And they would start talking about their war stories where they had gone through one episode after the other of dealing with situations and people. After a while, the idealism that I'm just going to stand in the pulpit and fire is going to shoot out from my fingertips and Revival's going to break out in the town, and it's going to be glorious. I'm going to be in great demand everywhere for my great preaching and anointing that I walk in. Such was the mindset of those days. We're
How's
talking
that
about
worked out?
Well, it didn't. Things didn't turn out as I supposed. These are the days of the mid to late 1980s, and TV preachers still had some respect, and you kind of wanted to follow in the wake of their example and that kind of thing. But what I began to realize, especially as I got into more of a local church ministry, whether that was as a youth pastor or then as pastoring churches myself, something I thought I'd never do, you start realizing it's more than just preparing a Sunday morning sermon. They're people. And the Father is able to use problems and issues and struggles to sand down your sharp edges and smooth and refine you and mold you. I went into ministry, as a young man, very idealistic, just had this fascinating plan of how it was going to work. And between the idealistic issues of my mind then and the realism of where I am now, there's a lot of hurt, a lot of triumph, a lot of ups and downs, nights in prayer, struggles, anger, all of the good and bad emotions. And the reason I say all that, it's not talking about me, it's talking about the young people coming up right now who likewise, they perhaps in their minds are thinking, if and when I'm a leader in this thing, the Hebraic roots community, whatever you want to call it, we're going to change, we're going to mold, we're going to go in a different direction. We're not going to repeat the failures of the past. And they got this very idealistic thing. Mm-hmm. And I just know that between where they are now and 10 to 20 years down the road, where they'll be then, there's a lot of stuff and people and issues that they're going to have to go through. And I thought it was tough in our day. The world societies as they are now makes it even much more complicated. They need to be groomed and helped and trained. But how do you help an idealistic young person who says, I already know, you can't tell me anything?
Okay. Let me break something. Let me break something loose here. I was just at Revive, as most know. I had one youth session, which thank you, Mr. Barry Phillips. It was a great success. Anybody wants to go to my YouTube or Vimeo channel, you can see the Could You Win an Apple Eating Contest. And they had a little bit of a surprise at the end, did they not? Yeah. And so that led us into a session on Be Not Deceived. It was good. It was over the top. But that was not my true purpose. I had another gentleman, Mike Farley, that was taking over the youth from that point on. Went well. We saw young people come to Messiah. We saw a lot of commitment go on within that realm. It was great. It was wonderful. But our real ministry for Revive was with the young adults, ages 19 to supposed to be 30, but we fudged that one a little bit since I'm in charge of the room. We kind of let people in. And in there, it was myself, my son Daniel was leading worship, backing up. Daniel was Ryan Cribbs, David Covert, Exodus Road Band, and a young man who I've just gotten to know recently, Nathan Stanley. We ended up bringing in some others there along the way. Daniel got up and gave started. I mean, we knew what we had a direction, Barry. But let me tell you, I know what it's like to whitewater raft now. I've never been in. I never looked out at that raft and thought, I really would like to be in the middle of that thing. It's just not part of my personality. But I understand what it is, because we had a direction, and it was like there's a curve and there's some rapids, and it was the most incredible experience of watching this thing come together. Daniel got up and he coined a phrase in the midst of this that I think is going to stick for a long time: the forgotten generation. The young people that I was speaking to, Barry, regarding this movement, are not idealistic. They're anything but. They have a love for God. They have enough inside of them that they understand that they're part of something that's right, that's true. But yet, let's look at it. This is the generation that was raised with Y2K. Some of their first memories. The world is going to
implode.
It's going to end. Some of them were 5, 6, 7 years old. The next thing is 9/11. And then, this war, that war, the other war, economy crashing, .com bubble. These young people have gone through it. And Daniel said in the midst of that something that was very intriguing to me. He said, my formative years were in the time frame of 2010, 2015, regarding Messianic Hebrew Roots Walk. He actually attended his first revive in 2015. He said that wasn't, and he looked at kind of at me. He says that wasn't our best years. True.
Yeah.
A lot of division in that time. A lot of calendars and names and all this stuff that you and I may bring up, but they're over it. They're over it. I hear people talking from the platform, from the stage, about continuing this thing of calendars, and that's old history. Let's leave it in the books. It's there in the books. It's part of our history. But I don't think we need to visit that page as many times as we do. He says, he said something. He said, I'm just with the youth. He says, I believe that the youth right now are poised to a place of success, because a lot of those divisions, some of those divisions are past. There's kind of a newness on the stage at the moment. He says, I'm part of a generation that's kind of been forgotten about. We went through the stuff, and now people are like, well, let's just kind of move on. He said, I'm no longer going to be forgotten about. I'm going to make an impact.
Mm.
And impact we made. Did the adults, even at the end of the Revive, did most adults even understand what had gone on? No. It was I won't say disheartening, but and this is not just Revive, Barry. This is, I spend a lot of time, as much as I can, speaking to youth, speaking with youth, speaking with young adults. They don't want to be talked at. They want to be talked with. They've got some wonderful ideas. They've got energy. They've got passion. We need to be talking with them. But for the most part, this may sound judgmental and people can take exception with me, but from what I see, this movement still feels that the youth and young adults are pretty much irrelevant. That must change.
If we go back to what I opened up with, Moshe could have drawn tribal leaders, seasoned men, older men, but he reached down across a generation or so. I mean, the man was 80 at this time. He may have reached down 2 generations.
Oh, yeah.
And brought young men into a place of involvement. He made them significant. He didn't bring them up and say, now y'all watch me and watch how I do this.
Yeah.
They operated as a functioning priesthood. The idea that we expect a generation or 2 behind us to immediately honor us. Well, we're just older and we know better. That may have worked for you and I when we were their age, but it's not going to work now. Mike, I think one of the greatest things that we can do to encourage and elevate and promote the generations that you're talking about is to live the life that we have in Yeshua and following his commands. We have the testimony of Yeshua and we keep his commands. To do it with joy, with a smile on our face and with a sense of exuberance. And when they're around us, instead of us saying everything that is wrong in the world and in our community, talk about the awesomeness of Yeshua and the expectation of what we believe in him to do in the next days. Now we can get they don't want to hear he's coming probably this year, and the latest sign and the latest indication is it's going to be this young Teruah, etc. They've been told that we're in crisis mode, final Exodus mode, greater Exodus mode. They've heard that until it's come out of their ears. What they want to know is I can anticipate living the days that are in front of me, whatever number they are, with the same joy and hope and power that you have. Why would anybody want to follow an anemic, powerless, joyless, depressed leader? Mm-hmm. Nobody wants that.
Well, here's one of the reasons, is because there's been more emphasis on the doomsday clock than on the kingdom clock.
Agreed.
Okay. So if you come to someone and all you're talking about is the conspiracies and all the bad stuff, instead of going, hey guys, okay, there's this section of time that we're going to walk through, but let me tell you what's on the other end. When you approach it like that, I see passion coming forth. But if all you're doing is chemtrails and Nephilim and all that stuff that is, in my opinion, very irrelevant, what are you going to get? You're going to get a hopeless generation, and that's what's been brought forth. Let me take you back to what you said regarding Moshe. I think that Moshe understood something, or maybe I should say it this way. It may sound a little bit less arrogant. I understanding something that Moshe understood. And that is why I coined this phrase, talked with Brad Scott of blessed memory about it years ago. And Brad actually was tracking with me totally on this, that it is not the next generation. It is a rising generation. And it bothers me to hear people talk about the next generation. And anyone who's talking about the next generation is basically saying to this generation, you are irrelevant. You're irrelevant until, I complete my task in life and I have my goals and my dreams. And then maybe you can do something. There's a verse that many of us in this walk in this Torah walk are really thrilled about. And so, and we get more and more thrilled about it with each passing year. And that is stand in the presence of a person with gray hair. I like the verse because,
It's up there.
it's up there. I know you dye yours.
No, I don't.
To,
No, I don't.
to match your shirt.
It's all right here, though, right now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. My wife looked at me. She says, "Your beard is turning white." I said, yeah, well, it's at least it's not turned loose. But back with me, Barry. Back with me.
I'm working. I'm trying to get back to you. Go ahead.
Okay. In being infatuated over the verse, stand in the presence of a person with gray hair. Be a person worth standing for. Be a person that's worth standing for. Because see, that verse, I'm understanding that verse of why would they stand in the presence of a person with gray hair unless they've seen someone with gray hair worth following.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a room, you're sitting there in a room, and you see someone, and they say, "Hey, I'm going somewhere." The first step in you following them is getting out of your chair. So if we're not going anywhere, or if we're going in a different direction than is the direction the Father is speaking to them, which is always about the kingdom, why should they follow us?
Mm-hmm.
Or why should they just listen to us if the general idea of our speech at them is just to speak at them,
Right?
instead of challenging them to move forward. I mean, this is the essence of where we are, of who we are. This is where we should be looking to right now, Barry. I think I got the thing pretty well figured out as far as my own life. But if that's all I'm doing, if I'm not passing it on, if I'm not challenging, if I'm walking through if I'm at my congregation and none of the young people are engaging with me, if I'm at a conference, whether it be Revive or wherever else it is, and I just go do my thing, step off the platform and head to my room, and none of those young people walk over, and it should be like, and I take the Revive model here because I was just there. It should be difficult for me to get from the room that our meeting was in to my personal hotel room because of people that are walking up going, "Hey, could I spend a few minutes with you?" It should be a difficult thing to get from one place to another. If you just step out of one room and head to another room and nobody stops you to engage you, you never engage them. You might as well just talk to yourself. You were irrelevant in the room, even though you might think you were something.
The first thing that comes to my mind as you're saying that, Mike, is a teaching I did. You were there with us in Lake City, Florida, about warring shepherds.
Yeah.
And
one of your best.
One of the things that was key in that particular teaching was this, that we have had years of phenomenal teachers, and they have played a vital strategic role, and they're still necessary. And we've got a long list of teachers out there. You and I have tried to fill that role for a long time. That's wonderful. And that there's a place for that. But we are at a place now that what Yah is doing is fulfilling his word from Jeremiah 23 and Ezekiel 34, when he says, I'm going to raise up shepherds.
That's right.
The sheep are scattered, and they're scattered on every mountain. That is, and one way of looking at that is that they have scattered after their variety of teachers. Some are following this one and that one and the other one. But Yah's wanting to bring the sheep together. And to do that, he needs shepherds. The difference between a shepherd and a teacher is while a teacher would stand in front of an audience, practically speaking, and share his latest revelation and understanding of something. It's informative. It's maybe exciting. It may be inspiring. But is it long-term life-changing? Well, that really depends on how much application is required out of what they've shared. A shepherd is somebody who's going to take the routine of the Torah cycle, the consistency of relationship on a personal basis, and they're going to break down opportunity after opportunity. They're going to break down the word and help someone to take what's been shared, digest it, and live it out.
Yeah.
That requires time and patience and involvement. You're right. If someone walks off of a platform after sharing a teaching and they wade through an audience of people who are, oh, what have they done other than maybe inspire for the moment? I'm not belittling what they've done. I'm just saying that someone that is a shepherd is someone that's approachable and you can have a conversation with, and they're going to do more than just tell you, they're not, when you're asking a question, they're not already thinking in their mind, well, this is what I'm going to tell them when they hush. No, you're more about listening to what the person has got to say. Yeah. And you wait until after they finish before you try to formulate your response. Shepherding is what's required now. A younger generation has heard the teaching. What they need, I believe, is the relational instruction of how to put all of that information into practice. Mm-hmm. Because you can only live off of inspiration so long. You need instruction on a daily basis.
Yeah. You can only live on dessert for a certain amount of time, even though it tastes good. I was at a conference. It's been a while ago. I don't want to give a date or time because I don't want to give the conference I was at. But I was approached by a group of young adults many years ago. I was approached by, and this is before I actually started doing anything with youth, young adults. I was approached by a group of young adults and sat and talked with them for quite some time. And one of the worst things I heard was they looked at me and said, "We don't feel like the teachers that are here care about us." I just sat there and thought about that. It should be the adults too, but if the young people in the room don't think that we care about them, how in the world are we expecting them to respond? They're not going to. They're not going to respond. They've got to know we care. We care about them individually. And that should be a goal for all of us. And not just for teachers, but for everybody in the room. Make sure that those that are rising, the rising generation, knows that you're here for them, that you care about them, and you want to be involved in their life. That may take some work because it's going to mean you got to get out of your comfort zone and learn some things that are important to them. And and maybe change some things about what you do and add some things, because your way of communicating is not the way they're communicating anymore. So maybe you got to spend some time figuring out how to communicate. And that brings me to a commercial. It brings me to something, Barry. I sat down and spoke with Ryan, Daniel, and David afterwards, and the question was asked in a roundtable discussion we recorded, be released this afternoon. And tomorrow, where do we go now? What do we do? Do we wait just for another year? Okay, let's just, okay, wow, we had a great time. It's wonderful. Okay, we'll get back to, next year and we'll go at it. No. So we had no idea how to answer the question. And then it was when I was on the way back, I was talking to Daniel with what little voice I had left. And after 7 hours of being, in meetings, it was a little scratchy. And youth today, the communication for youth today is podcasts. I remember doing the first podcast. I mean, I went on, when I did my first podcast, I put it up on Apple, which was the only thing that there was there. And there was only 618 podcasts on the Christian genre. I was the first one to teach Torah on the Christian genre. Now there's thousands and thousands. I'm like, I don't want to get that mixed again. But this is how they're communicating. This is how they're receiving their information, is podcast. So here's a news flash, Barry. In the next week or two, there's a new podcast coming. The hosting of it is myself, Daniel, our son Daniel, Ryan Cribbs, David Covert. Scheduled guest stars, speakers on there are going to be Barry Phillips and various others. But in the coming weeks, we're going to be releasing a new podcast called Life on Purpose. And so this is a way. And I tell you what, I've spent hours already on my computer, got hours more, spending money, on new technology that I've got to have, all that kind of stuff. I didn't want to do this, Barry, but this is what needs to be done to speak to this rising generation. So I'm going to ask people in the few minutes we have left here. You've been listening to Watching Foundations for Life, the technology that I'm using. Already talking to Barry about it, about putting the 10-minute Torah on a podcast. Maybe Foundations for Life is going to end up being on a podcast, all those things. So this is going to take, it takes time, it takes energy, and wow, it takes money to do that. So maybe you've been listening to Foundations for Life for a while. You've been blessed by it. But you never reached in your own wallet, in your own bank account, and said, I need to be involved. This is an appeal to be involved, because Foundations for Life is only a part of the ministry that I do, that Barry does, and I think it's fruitful. So people can go to remnantofisrael.com, right?
Yes.
And or joinedtohashem.org, and could use your help right now. Both of us could, because we've got some challenges ahead of us regarding just things we need to look into and to purchase, to be a part of this and to make it go forward. A lot of vision, folks. Life on purpose. The basis is God created this world on purpose. And you're here on purpose. So you need to live your life on purpose. And that's the basis. To tell you that's just the beginning of the vision that we have, that's an understatement. So running out of time, Barry.
Yeah, I'd encourage folks to heed Mike's words there, but we don't have to allow the forgotten generation to remain forgotten. If we can enable that generation to become energized, focused, and encouraged, participating in a fruit-bearing way, it will propel who all of us are way down the road. And those are incredible people. They just need They just need to know someone is looking at them and not looking beyond them.
Hey, it may be that if it takes a few years for the kingdom to come, it may be that young person that you spoke to that's pushing your wheelchair in.
Thanks, folks, for watching. Share on your social media pages. Encourage others to watch, and we do appreciate your comments and questions. So feel free to post those, and we will see you again next week. Looking forward to it, Mike.
See you, Barry.
See you.